Guys, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming. I know 8 o'clock's kind of early for some of us. Welcome to Business and Breakfast, and this is the first in a multi-part series called So You Want to Own a Business. The idea for this series came about, I don't know, months ago, Malin, and small businesses are just so critical to our local economy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but first let's do a quick icebreaker. Let's run around the room, or not run, but go around the room, and if you'll tell me your name, why you're here, what you hope to learn or accomplish, and your favorite thing about small businesses. So I'm Sally Hawkins, and really more than anything, we just want to get the conversation started about how critical small businesses are to communities just like Guyman. My favorite thing about small businesses is what they give back to the local community. We know, hands down, they contribute way more to local causes than a large business does. So, Malin?
I'm Malin Johnson. I'm with Main Street Guyman. And what I like about the small businesses, I like having the personal touch instead of a staff, going in and they know you and they just take better care of you, I think.
I'm Jennifer Williams. I own Dizzy B's Corner Mart across the street. We're just a mom and pop store, and we love knowing our customers. We have a lot of local regulars, and I hope to learn a little more about owning a business, running a business.
My name's David Winger, and I'm Dean of Business at Panhandle State. I teach business classes, and one of my favorite classes to teach every year is small business management. And for the class, we have the students write a business plan. And most of them are all involved. It's some kind of plan for small business. And so I just love the ingenuity they have. A couple of years ago, we had 2 bull riders come into class, and I thought, these guys aren't going to do any good. And their business was to tie their own bull ropes. They were going to have custom made bull ropes. It was so interesting, and they had it fine tuned. So,
I'm Susan Clark. I'm the family advocate at the Head Start Center here, and I like for small businesses, I like the personal touch that you get and just knowing the people.
My name is Randy Jacobs. My purpose for being here is twofold. I work for PTCI and I work with small businesses and businesses in general, specifically, and I wanted a little bit of enhanced knowledge, some terms maybe that I'm vague on. And recently we bought a small business. My wife and I did, so I'm going to cut that sword with 2 edges.
Good morning. My name is Shelby Redcorn. I own Redcorn Massage. I'm here today just so I can learn more about my business and help my clients out, better my business and whatnot. I enjoy all the small businesses around town because I know people care about me when I go into their shop, that I know they're willing to go the extra mile for me. Like I'm willing to go the extra mile for any of my clients.
I'm Molly Scott. I'm opening a health food store soon, and I just want to be sure to know what I'm going to do. I've never taken business classes. I was a teacher until this year, so this is all new. But I think we all have the same opinion about small businesses. I love being able to call a place and they know who I am and know what I want. So that's it.
I'm Marianne Harrington, and I'm semi-retired. I take care of a number of rentals for us. And I've been here about 16 years, and I grew up in a small town. And then it grew up around me to a big town. And I like very much I've always been in business, and to know who I'm doing business with, and to enjoy a social time with them and a charitable contribution event and business. Thank you.
My name is Corey Sills. I'm with Precision Construction. I moved here about 8 months ago to be close to family. That's my mom over there. And I started my own business here, and I'm taking this class to, I took your small business management when I was in California, same class. But you can always learn. So I'm taking this class to be a little better at what I'm doing. My favorite part of being in a small business, most of my customers are friends. I mean, they may start as clients or friends, or as clients or customers, but they usually end up a first name basis, and we end up friends, and that's what I like about it. Thank you.
I gotcha.
And I hope you're never too old to learn.
Never too low.
I'm Tanner Henderson. My grandpa is Jim Barnes. He runs Guyman Safety Lane, and actually my great-grandpa built the shop way back when, back in 1900, none of your business. And I like small businesses because, because the personal touch, because we get to know clients, and if you've ever walked into Guyman Safety Lane, you know we don't have technology. And the word of mouth is how we get business, and that just being a good mechanic shop and doing our job right, we get that word of mouth to other people, and that's how we get our businesses. So I guess that's why I like small business. And I came here just to learn a little bit before I take over the shop. So.
Great. Y'all want to do it? Go for it.
Hi, I'm Catherine Martin. I'm an employee here at Bank of the Panhandle. I am here in this class to get to know some of you guys and learn as well about our balance sheets and business things that we need here. So,
hi, I'm Shelby Roach. I work in the loan department here at BOP. I guess on the flip side for me, I really enjoy working in the loan department, and I kind of see it from a different side. I really like to be able to help our small business owners and see them give back to the community. I think it just comes full circle for me.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Phillips, and I'm terrified of microphones. I'm a credit analyst here at the bank for about 6.5 years, and I love small business. I work in small business, and I deal with small businesses all day, and numbers is my thing. So I'm here to learn what your questions might be and how we can help small businesses in our community.
Great. So I found this quote and I thought it was applicable today. You need a lot of passion for what you're doing because it is so hard. Without passion, any rational person would give up. And so I think when we think about small businesses, we know that within 5 years, almost 50% of small businesses are closed. And so in order to survive, it's going to take a lot of passion. And that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, but first I want to do a quick overview of what's coming up ahead. So we have 8 weeks of courses, and 8 is a lot of weeks, so we are not asking for an 8-week commitment from anybody, but to the degree you or someone you know might find any of these classes beneficial, we are opening our doors and would love to talk. So obviously today, so you want to own a business. Then September 13th, we're going to do capital and cash flow. Lisa and Coulter Hedrick are going to talk about how to raise funding to get a business off the ground, how to manage your cash flow so that you can pay your bills and pay your employees and all that fun stuff. September 20th, we will do Am I Making Any Money? So it's one thing to have a business, it's another to know whether you're making money or not. And in small businesses especially, it's really easy for those lines to get blurred and to pay your child care out of the business account. And at that point, it's sometimes hard to know, am I making any money? So Coulter and Lisa are going to talk about that. September 27th, make banking work for you. So anymore, banks have lots of little services that can make your life a lot easier as a small business owner. Specifically, things like using automatic or ACHs, automatic drafts for payroll, for billing, to pay your bills, to bill other people, things like that, that can instead of you having to send out or receive checks and write out deposit slips, it can all kind of be automated. And that's something that Paul Montgomery here at the bank works with a lot of small businesses, and he'll talk about maybe some things that as a small business owner you can use that will make your life easier. October 4th, our goal is to have a small business roundtable, so we'd love to have a great turnout for that event. If we need to move to a different location, we'll do it, but the reality of it is that as small business owners or employees, we all have to be in this together to make sure our small businesses survive and thrive. And so we envision this as sort of a roundtable discussion of, okay, hey, what's working, what's not working? How can we encourage people to participate, to get out in the community, especially as the holiday season comes up? How do we get shoppers here? October 11th, human resources. Lots of questions for small business owners regarding HR. How do you hire? How do you fire? How do you keep people? Payroll taxes, unemployment taxes, all of that fun stuff we'll talk about on October the 11th. October 18th, as much as you love your business, someday you may want to retire. And as a small business owner, there are certainly challenges with retirement and succession planning. Because if you're not going to be around, somebody else either needs to be or your business is going to close. So we'll talk about retirement and succession. And then on October 25th, I will not pretend to know anything about insurance except what I absolutely have to, but somebody who knows a lot more than I will be here to talk about sort of the ins and outs of insurance for small business owners. What do you need? How much do you need? That kind of stuff. Okay, so today, we're going to talk about why small businesses matter. We're going to talk about some success tips. We'll talk about a business plan, and for some of you who have a business, maybe how revisiting that business plan could be beneficial. And then a business entities. What kind of entity do you need for your small business? There are 28 million small businesses in the United States. 70% are owned and operated by a single person. That was sort of a surprising fact for me. If you think about that, that's a lot of single-owned businesses. They employ 57% of the country's private workforce. They pay for 44% of the United States payroll, and 60 to 80% of new jobs come from small businesses. So I believe that small businesses are critical for Guyman, but even more so for any community within our state, within our nation. This may be a little bit hard to read, but I'll point out some of the more interesting facts. We just talked about this. Small businesses pay 44% of the United States private payroll. This, I think, is really important to point out. 89% of consumers believe that small businesses contribute positively to their local communities. And I think when we look around Guyman, some people call them challenges. I like to call them opportunities, but we've got lots. And it's the small business owners who are going to make Guyman better. Small businesses created 65% of new jobs created in 2009, so it's a little bit of old data, but we believe it's still on par with that number. And then 93% of consumers believe it's important to support the local small businesses that they value in their community. And then finally, 78% of small businesses believe that there's a growing appreciation of shopping locally. Do you guys believe that? Have y'all seen that shift in Guyman? You do?
Yeah, well, when we buy parts, we try to buy locally, like L&J and stuff like that, just to keep it in town.
Yep.
So, it's just tough. It's just tough to keep up with box. And it's a real challenge, I think, for a small business. They have to do something to make up for the product difference, and it has to be service. And that includes bringing in product that someone requests.
Certainly. So we're so excited about your new store because there are things that we buy online because we can't find it in Guyman.
Online.
So we're
Amarillo, Oklahoma City, traveling lots. So hopefully
we're optimistic that lots of people feel that way.
Good. Me too.
Well, we think it's great. Okay. So I asked some local business owners what tips they would give. The first one, it should be fun, but it won't be easy, came from a 72-year-old gentleman who has had a business for 40 years. And so he had another suggestion, but it included a fair amount of profanity, so I passed on that one. But basically it was work really hard. And so it should be fun, but it won't be easy. The second one, save during the good months, came from a business owner who has had a business for about 2.5 years. So he's close to, he's in that 5-year period of, hey, some months are good, some months are bad. Make sure you're saving during the good months. Know your net margin. So this came from what I would call a true entrepreneur and a lender here at the bank. He's run lots of his own businesses and he has helped lots of other people get off the ground. So he says, know your net margin. What he means by that is you take all the money you're bringing in, all your revenue, and then you take all your expenses and you take out the interest you pay the bank and the taxes and the stock dividends, and you get what's left over. And you want what's left over to be positive, right? And so knowing your net margin helps you to stay afloat, especially in tough times. Details matter. This came from my boss, Steve Baggerly. He said, you think that, that employee, you're not really sure how to handle that situation. Maybe it's easier to just close your eyes to it. Or, that expense is a little more than you want it to be. He said all those little pieces really add up. And so pay attention to the details. And then finally, have a plan. So these are local tips, basically. If you look in the left hand in your folder, I've printed out several other articles that include tips. One of them is Mark Cuban's top 12 tips for a business startup. And then there's a couple others in there that you can look through whenever you have time that I think are not necessarily all right, but at least good food for thought. One of my favorites was don't start a company unless it's an obsession. And if you have an exit strategy, it's not an obsession. So I thought that was good food for thought. So to get all of that started, we talk about a business plan. And if you want to, we're going to go through a couple of handouts that I've provided for you. The first is titled Oklahoma Business Startup Guide. And we'll flip through this kind of fast. This is sort of information that's useful when you begin to plan your business. And for some of you, you already have a business, so this may not be quite as relevant. But your name and legal structure. Have any of y'all been on the Oklahoma Secretary of State website where you can search for your business name and file and do all that fun stuff? So the Secretary of State website has pretty much everything you need to secure your business name, to reserve that name. And then your legal structure, which we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. So we will pass that. Then we've got your employer tax ID number. Have any of you had to go on the IRS website, get your tax ID number? Familiar with that process? Was that easy for you or was that frustrating? It was pretty easy. Yeah. Yep. They make it pretty easy. They want to make sure they get your money, right? So any professional or occupational licenses. Jennifer, you can probably speak to some of that. You deal with that with the lottery, I bet. Is that? Yep. So each business is different. I assume, Molly, that you'll get to work with the health department in some respect, and go through that. So to the degree you have a new idea for a business, you just need to figure out, okay, what licenses will I need to apply for? Who's going to govern me? So for example, at the bank, we're governed by the FDIC, and we're sort of at their mercy. But I think most businesses have some sort of licensing requirement. DHS maybe, if you're dealing with childcare and stuff like that. Does anyone have questions about that, about what licenses or permits are required?
So what are, I mean, of course you're supposed to all have your licensing and permits, but what are the repercussions of not having the actual proper licensing? Like a slap on the hand, or can it vary to where you get a huge fine and you can potentially ruin a business or have a huge setback?
So I think it depends, right? And guys, y'all may have something to add to this, but I think it depends on how big of a grievance was it, right? Okay. So if you have 6 toddlers that you're taking care of and you haven't been doing anything, and somebody walks in and there's, I don't know, mice crawling over, I mean, that's going to be a problem. Yeah. You're probably not going to have a business. But as far as, usually the statute sets out what kind of penalty, if any, there is. Okay. And sometimes it is just a slap on the wrist. Sometimes it's more egregious. We were talking yesterday, if you mess with the IRS, they get really fussy. And so I've just kind of learned, I think one time I thought I had missed the filing deadline for our income tax return. And I think the penalty is like $150, or maybe it's like I don't know. David, you may know. I want to say it's like $1,000 per shareholder. And so if we have 40 shareholders, it was a $40,000 penalty. And I didn't miss it, so it was okay, but I've never forgotten that lesson of you don't really know until you have to write that check. Do y'all have any experiences on licensing?
The only thing I can ever remember seeing specifically is some sort of withholding of funds. I know that somehow if you receive funds, the IRS can actually withhold part of that from you, which is not fun. Yep. So figuring out how to do it right up front is probably the best idea.
The IRS is fussy frequently. Employee income tax and other payroll benefit withholdings, that can be a big one for small businesses. Anybody have questions about that process? Navigating that process?
If you don't do it yourself, get a good person to do it for you.
That's actually, I'm glad you said that, because
That person is Rick Roberts.
Yeah,
He's good.
I'm glad you said that, because I do think as a small business owner, there's probably some things that aren't really your area of expertise, and it's certainly sometimes easier to just hire the help. Have a good accountant who can help you. If you need help setting up a business entity, hire an attorney to help you through that process. It's better to get it set up right, and especially when it comes to payroll taxes, that can be, again, you're kind of messing with the federal government, the IRS, and they get fussy. So, then.
I'd like to know more about the gray areas of subcontractors.
Okay.
What constitutes that, and where that can be allowed and not allowed, and what benefits are to that versus just having an employee, a regular employee.
So generally, I'm a Texas attorney. I'm not an Oklahoma attorney, but in Texas and I think by and large in most states in the United States, the rule or the test is the subcontractor comes in and they do a job for you, and they do it exactly how they want to do it. I mean, you may say, for example, we want whatever, we're going to put a counter here, and you would hire a subcontractor, they'd come in, they would do it, and they are not necessarily, you're not dictating every single step of the way. So that's sort of a subcontractor. Whereas if it's an employee in a true employee relationship, they don't have a whole lot of flexibility in what they do or in how they do it. They're really at your mercy every step of the way. A lot of times a subcontractor is somebody with a specific area of expertise as opposed to a secretary. So usually a secretary is going to be an employee because they're doing things you want them to do day in, day out. Whereas, I don't know.
Can a subcontractor be period of time?
It can be.
A contract period of time?
Mm-hmm. It can be. A subcontractor doesn't necessarily have to have a beginning and an end for a contractual period. It's really a matter of the test is looking at what are they doing, and is it something that you are guiding them on how to do, or is it something that you said, I want a house built, and they go and build the house to your specs, if that makes sense. Does anyone else have comments on that? I won't pretend to be.
Just that it was very surprising to get here and find out that there really wasn't such a thing as a general contractor. Where I come from, we had to get a license to be a general contractor. And it was really hard. It was really hard. And it took time. But you were in charge of the whole project, and it was your responsibility for each sub to do what they were supposed to do. And then Corey came here, and he looked everywhere to find out where he studied for his general license, and everybody, you don't.
Yeah, certainly for
They looked at me so funny when I said, yeah, I'm starting a new general contractor business. I need my licensing, my bonding, and insurance. And they kind of blinked at me and go, well, just put a sign out. I said, okay.
It was very different. So the responsibilities were narrowed down to each subcontractor, and yet you were hiring them.
To your point, Randy, it's always good to document that stuff, and that's sort of the lawyer hat. They'll tell you, make sure you sort of have it documented, document. The same goes not necessarily for the difference between a subcontract or a contractor versus an employee, but also for a salaried versus an hourly employee. There are some very specific Department of Labor restrictions. If you have an employee and you're paying them salary, they have to have certain things they're doing, basically kind of a professional status, or they have to be making decisions for the business without sort of a manager type. And so I know a lot of times in a small business, they say, well, I'm going to pay you salary, whatever, $1,000 a month. And really, unless that person meets that profile of qualifying for salary, they really need to be paid hourly. The reason is because if you pay them salary and you're making, let's call it, say I'm going to pay you $300 a week, but you're working 60 hours a week, then if you're not paying them enough to qualify for minimum wage or overtime, if they work over 40 hours a week, then you have to pay overtime if they don't meet the Department of Labor's standard for salary. But really it comes down to what are they doing and how much control do you have over what they're doing versus what are they doing, and if they get to control the process.
It also manifests in payroll taxes. You don't withhold on a subcontractor,
Nope.
but you withhold on an employee, and so that you've got to really make the decision as what they are.
For sure.
And who pays, when you pay someone a salary, you're responsible for their payroll taxes.
Yes.
And when you pay a subcontractor, they're responsible for their taxes. And it really, you really better know.
If you're self-employed, if you're a contractor and you're treating yourself as self-employed, that's an additional 15.3% because you have to pay both the 7.65% for the employee and the employer. So that really adds up. It's certainly to the advantage of the person paying you if they don't have to mess with the payroll piece of it. But for you, it's might be better if they at least are paying half of it and withholding it. And that way at the end of the year, when you're paying your taxes, you don't have to come up with that large amount. Okay. Written plan, we're going to go over that. Contacts. So some of this stuff I simply put in so that you guys would have contacts, some point of reference. There's the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. If you get on their website, they have a lot about small businesses. The Oklahoma Tax Commission. Are you guys familiar with the OTC? I'm sure you are. The OTC is where you would submit any sales tax. You're required to submit any use tax, which, is anyone familiar with use tax? So use tax is what you're required to pay when you buy something basically online. And you wouldn't really think of that, except I know several businesses that have been audited for not paying use tax. And so you are supposed to file it monthly, kind of like you would submit a sales tax. But if I buy for the bank, if the bank buys a bunch of stuff online, like I can't think of anything. Sometimes software, we get software pieces for software or hardware pieces online. Then at the end of the month, if that retailer, that online retailer didn't withhold use tax, we submit a file to the tax commission and pay them what we were supposed to pay them for sales tax.
Construction's a big use tax.
Mm-hmm.
So how does, I guess that's different. The fact that sales tax, a lot of times if you buy something online, you get this little note that you're responsible for the, well.
So that's use tax.
What kind of regulatory, there's nothing to make you do that.
There is nothing to make you do that unless you get an audit. And like I said, I know some businesses who have been audited, or an individual can be audited. And so for my husband and I, what we do at the end of the year, God bless the Oklahoma Tax Commission, they will let you take some percentage, and no, you don't hear that very often, they will let you take some percentage of your adjusted gross, your AGI, your adjusted gross income, and you pay some percentage of that. Good morning. In as use tax. And then that way you're paying something. I buy stuff online, we buy stuff online. And so that's the easiest way for us to do it. That way you don't have to track every single thing you buy.
That would, and nobody's going to do it.
Yeah, I would assume accountants are familiar with that, and a lot of times they'll just tack that on if you're not. But certainly it's not a big deal unless you get audited, and the reason we know about it is because we know some people who've been audited. So that use tax, especially if you're buying inventory or whatever online, that can certainly add up.
That would make more sense to do it.
And so it was a really big deal a couple of months ago, maybe in March. Amazon started collecting sales tax and reporting it to the state of Oklahoma. And it has made a significant difference in the revenue that ends up in Texas County. And so it's meaningful that I know nobody wants to pay tax, but it is helpful in making sure your city government can function.
Well, that's how we maintain this life that we want.
Exactly. Okay, OTC, Oklahoma Employment Security Commission. Any questions about our good friends there? If you have an ex-employee file unemployment on you, that's who you get to work with. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, the IRS. We've talked about the IRS, but what I learned in law school is pretty much the IRS always wins. So as far as it goes, if they can find the money, they're most likely they're going to get it. So those are all things to consider. And then we'll start with this SBA, right, your business plan. And we'll flip through that really quick. I think there's some good information to consider. You'll see it says this piece of paper, it says traditional business plan format. It's page 3 of 8, if that's helpful. So business plans, can y'all think, did any of you when you started a business have a business plan? Do you think it would have been helpful? So business plans are good, in my opinion, for sure for 3 different reasons. One is for you. It's sort of kind of your little business Bible and kind of gives you what is it that your core goal was when you got started, and where are you going and how are you getting there. So your business plan is really just taking all of those thoughts you have in your head, fleshing them out and putting them on paper. The second group of people that it's beneficial for is a bank. In the event that you're going to need financing for your institution. This is the page I'm on, Shelby. 3 of 8, Small Business Administration. No, you're good. I know there's lots of papers. So the bank would love to see a business plan. I think lots of times that doesn't necessarily exist, but it's for sure a good starting point. And then the third group is in the event you're not going to get financing through a bank, but you want investors. An investor would want to see a business plan. So what do you put in a business plan? The first thing you would have is an executive summary, but I would argue it's the last thing you would write because you've got to write everything else so you know what you're going to put in your summary. The next step is your company description. And in your company description, you're going to tell about your company. What is it your company is doing and why is it going to be successful? So what competitive advantages? In the case of Dizzy Bees, I would argue your location is really helpful. And I don't know how you do what you do with lottery sales, but that's a competitive advantage for you.
That's amazing.
And so anybody have questions on what a competitive advantage is or how you would identify that? No? No. Okay. So competitive advantage, then you want to take a look at your market and what's your market analysis. I've put in your packet a census printout. So there's a lot of really helpful information on census.gov. You can compare Guyman to other communities. You can compare it to the state. And it can kind of give you an idea of, okay, what's unique about Guyman? What are the opportunities here? Maybe what are the challenges here? And as you work through that market analysis, that can be helpful. The other thing that I have at the top of that census information is a website. It's called PTCI.com. And PTCI has, I believe they do it quarterly. Melinda, do you know? So they get this, this geographical analysis done quarterly. It's on their website. You have access to it. And one of the things that's really cool about it, it's a 50-page document. There's all sorts of stuff in it. But one of the really neat things is that they do a gap analysis. And what they're trying to do is to determine what opportunity is there in our community. And so this is the geography within a 20-minute radius of Guyman. And it's saying, for example, with automobile dealers, you have demand for $44 million, and we have a supply of $34 million. And so it's saying that there's a gap of $9 million. Now, I don't know how this is done. I don't know whether it's accurate or not, but I do think it is a metric that you can look at and evaluate, hey, this is the area I'm interested in. Is there an opportunity here, or is the market full? And if the market's full, maybe I need to look at doing something different. So for health and personal care, 14 million to 10 million supply. So there's a gap of almost $4 million right there. So that would be a good opportunity. I will tell you, I think the furniture store information is inaccurate because we have 3 furniture stores and it's saying we have none. So this may not be perfect, but there's lots and lots of meat in this document that you can look through as you're trying to assess where is the opportunity in Guyman.
And this is on
PTCI.com. And if you go, let me show you, or try to show you. There it is. So if you go to PTCI.com, it's right here. demographics, and then it'll just pull up this really large document. So it's 46 pages and has all sorts of, there's your table of contents. And so it looks at you know, how many households are making more than $100,000, what's your age distribution. Does anyone know what the median age is for Guyman? Anyone want to guess?
It's one of the youngest in the state.
I think it's 32, but that's pretty close. So we've got lots of millennials. And I know that's kind of a dirty word, but you can embrace them or not, but they're here, and we've got a lot of them in Guyman. Say that again? I know. I hate to tell you this, but you're probably one of them. So I heard a guy speak a couple of years ago about millennials, and he said there's two groups of millennials. There's the group that hates being associated with millennials, and then there's the millennials that are really millennials, who live with their parents and don't have a job and do all that stuff. And then there's the other group who don't want to be associated with them and have jobs and do the right thing and are making careers. So,
but I think another name for them should be customers, potential customers.
I think that's the point I'm trying to make. So they're here, and we've got to figure out how to serve them, and what do they want. And there's all sorts of books about that. If you're interested in learning about that, I can certainly point you in a direction. But so that's all good meat for your market analysis. And then you're going to look at an organization structure. For an organization structure, it can be, I think Mark Cuban, he suggests if you're doing a startup, have it be flat, which means you don't have a lot of hierarchy. You don't have a boss and a boss and a boss and then people who do work. You have kind of everyone on the same playing field, sort of that get it done mentality of we're all in this together, we're a team. So you get to pick that though, but it's good as you start a business to have an idea of how you want it to grow. If you know you want to grow into a hierarchical, then it's good to know that when you get started. Your service or your product line. Shelby, obviously for yours is massage therapy. And you get to decide what is your service and why would people use it? Once you've got that, you're going to look at marketing and sales. How do you market yourself? How do most of y'all market yourself?
Giveaways on Facebook.
Social media.
Social media is huge for us.
Word of mouth is where my business keeps coming.
Does anybody utilize newspapers still?
We do. Especially for the older population.
So that goes back to, okay, who's your target audience, sort of what's your market?
Well, it's also the educated, older and educated.
So you can call the newspaper if you're interested and get their circulation and see how many newspapers they distribute every day. I know in the last couple of years that's gone down, but I still think there's definitely a group of people who want that newspaper and they're looking at it and they're relying on it. But then there's that group, Shelby, and a lot of those millennials, they're on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
I do have a website posted for my business on Facebook. It is relevant, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so you just are sort of thinking through all of those pieces. Okay, what's this going to look like? And so once you kind of get that idea of the shape of your business and where is it going, you start looking at your financial projections, which in the event of wanting financing or investors, this is sort of where you want to put a lot of time and effort so it looks like you know what you're doing, right? So when it comes to financial projections, you are going to try to figure out, how am I going to make money? How long is it going to take me to make money? And where I think, and guys, we've got a room full of bankers, but where a lot of people miss stuff is maybe you forget about insurance, or you forget about payroll tax, or you forget about those little pieces, and they can certainly add up. I mean, Lisa, what would you say you see people forget about a lot? Sorry to put you on the spot.
For sure, insurance, and I think people immediately think, well, I'm going to need to cover my losses, but there are also other liability insurances. So it's always good when you're building your team to add in an insurance expert into that team so that they can advise on, did you think about this kind of coverage? Did you think about this kind of coverage? And you may end up declining, but that's why it's good for us to see the projection so that we can go through line item by line item, and we have tools to compare your business with the industry. And so there might be things you have left out completely, and there might be things you're overshooting or undershooting based on industry performance.
In the insurance class, we're actually going to have 4 different insurance agents come in and talk about different types of insurance for businesses, you know, that can save you from catastrophes or different things. So it's not just a class over the norm. It speaks about different things for different industries. So that might be interesting.
So the financial projections piece is where you figure out, am I gonna make it or not? And so spending lots of time on that, flushing through those ideas, asking other people who've done something similar, or asking your banker, or we're obviously always happy to help and take a look at stuff. That becomes really critical, because that's sort of your barometer of, okay, am I on track? Because you have all of these sort of touchy-feely factors, right? Your marketing piece and your HR piece and all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes down to those numbers and what's your revenue and what's your expense. And you need your revenue to be more than your spending. Questions about that?
Whenever we in our class, so we go through just like you did,
Yep.
you're doing here, and our inevitably, unless they're numbers, most aren't numbers kids, or so that they'll want to put the financial piece off to last. But we always tell them, we encourage them to do it first, because when you do it first, then you can write about how am I going to market this. Or how am I going to do all this other stuff? So once you do the financial piece, then you have really a lot more things to think about.
Certainly, and how much money do I have to do with that?
If this is not going to work, now I need to change something.
And to the degree you're selling a product, how much markup can you withstand, and all that fun stuff. Questions about business plan? I know we kind of went through it fast. My real goal was just to try to hit some key points that that y'all have questions about that might be beneficial to you if you are looking at a startup, or if you have an existing business, some stuff you might circle back around and take a look at. So the last thing I want us to talk about today is business entities. And I liked this. My dad really likes cartoons, and so I guess I inherited that, if you can do that. But employee of the month, and you can always be the employee of the month if you have your own business. So I think those of you who have a business can understand that. Do y'all have questions? I'll do a quick sort of overview of entities, and there's a packet that looks like this, and that has lots of information about business entities in it. Most small businesses are going to be a sole proprietorship. You own your own business and you're kind of doing business as. Then if you have a partner, obviously you start looking in the partnership realm. And there's lots of different kinds of entities. A lot of them you might choose for a tax purpose. Obviously a partner you're going to choose for a practical purpose, because there's more than one of you involved. There's partnership, and there's limited partnership, and then there's limited liability partnership. Questions about any of that? So the difference between a partnership, each partner is 100% liable. So if something goes bad, or if there's debts within the partnership, the business folds up, each partner is 100% responsible for it. In a limited partnership, there is something called a general partner. So each limited partnership, one person has to be liable, and then the other members can be protected. And sort of the same with a limited liability. When I practiced as a lawyer in Amarillo, I had a, I don't know, a fortunate or unfortunate, I guess you can decide, opportunity. We had a business, a large business called the American Housing Foundation. Some of y'all may have heard of it, but it was a Ponzi scheme. And we had some clients that were invested in it. And the way that the sort of mastermind had structured it was that there were dozens of limited partnerships. And the general partner would be a corporation or a limited partner. And so it would be like, you have a limited partnership, and the general partner would be a different entity. And then within that entity, there was limited liability and the general partner for that. And so it literally was layers and layers of entities that someone had spent thousands of dollars creating in an attempt to protect themselves from liability. And what I watched the court do was say, you, the person at the end of this long train, the investor, and let's say it was me, you were better fit to prevent all of this than anybody else, so I'm going to reach through all of those layers of protection and hold you liable. And so that's not to say that the limited liability is a bad thing, but it is to say if you're doing it because of some nefarious scheme, you're still going to be responsible, which honestly is maybe the way it should be, right? I mean, if you're intentionally doing something, or if you have the ability to determine it's bad and an innocent person doesn't have any of that background. But there are lots of lawyers who believe in lots of entities. And so I don't know if any of y'all have ever talked to a lawyer about setting up an entity for a specific business, but a lot of them will want 4 or 5. Well, we can do an entity for this and an entity for this. And there may be a legitimate purpose for that, but I would just say ask lots of questions in that instance, because it's not always worth all the effort. Because for every entity you have a tax return, you have any licenses that you may have to apply for, you have to keep your status with usually the Secretary of State, all of that stuff. So that's sort of partnerships, obviously 2 or more people. Taxes pass to the individual. Corporation is notorious for double taxation because earnings get taxed at the corporate level, and then if you make a distribution out of the corporation, they get taxed to the shareholder as well. There is an entity within the umbrella of corporations called S corporations. S corporations get to go around that double taxation, and all of the income just gets taxed to the shareholder. So there's lots of layers. I can talk about this stuff. It's kind of muddy. Does anyone have specific questions about how to decide what entity is right for you? Do you know what entity is right for you?
What's the difference between the S and the LLC, or the sole and the LLC?
A sole proprietorship and an LLC. So a sole proprietorship is you. Basically, you stand alone, you're doing business as. An LLC is a limited liability company. And so, of course, there's that limited liability language. It offers some protection to the members. LLCs have members, not shareholders. And the members get to choose how they are taxed. So they can be taxed as a partnership? Yeah, as a partnership or as an S corp. And so it either goes straight to you. Is that right?
Well, both
what am I not thinking about?
The owners would pay the tax liability.
Yeah. Okay. So it's that layer of protection, whereas the sole proprietorship, it's just you.
I would argue that from a practical standpoint, you'll nearly always find if you have an LLC or any other entity in the small business world, your lender is probably going to require that the individuals all signed guarantees. So as far as avoiding liability, if your sole purpose is to limit your liability financially, I will tell you that it's not worth your energy or expense to do that, because the expense is significant. You will have to do separate set of books. You will have to, as Sally pointed out, separate, maybe not separate tax returns. You can have an LLC if it's a sole member reported on your Schedule C. Isn't that right, Lisa? Mm-hmm. You might save the tax return part, but you're definitely going to have two sets of books. But if your attorney has advised you that it will limit your financial liability, not necessarily liability from personal injury or something, but if it's financial liability that you're concerned about, you're probably not going to avoid that. As small entities become larger and have more and more limited partners, then some of those partners may in fact not end up signing guarantees. But at the level that you're starting out with 2 or 3 partners, I will tell you almost every bank, and Mr. Winter can say what he's seen, but I think most banks end up requiring, most lenders end up requiring personal guarantees from everybody. Isn't that, would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with any of that. Yeah. Bankers always want to get paid.
That's right. Rule number 1.
The best advice is ask lots of questions. Neither of us intend to practice law or accounting, even though one of us is licensed. Not me. Ask lots of questions. Ask questions of the attorney, and then ask questions of a CPA or other people who are in business, and weigh the answers. Everybody will answer from their perspective, but it's important that you don't let other people make your decisions for you. Try to determine what the issues are and make them yourself. You'll be the one on the line.
For sure.
I would add that this is all really confusing. It was confusing for me when I was like, partnership, S Corp, I don't know which is which, but really the internet's your friend. Go Google and just figure out what the different types of entities are, and then you'll know in your mind kind of which direction you want. And then go visit with your attorney and go visit with your accountant, because that decision, one is tax. How am I going to be taxed? How are my owners going to be taxed? And the other decision is legally, how am I going to set up this structure? And if I decide to sell it or take on a partner, how will that look legally? So there's really 2 cases, tax and the legal entity.
There's a really nifty chart that is included in this sort of entity section that spells it out. Okay, this is sole proprietorship, personal tax only. For your limited liability company, it's usually it's 1 or more people. The owners are not personally liable, and you can either treat it like self-employment tax or like personal tax or corporate tax. Oh, no, sorry. You can tax personally or as corporate. So it kind of lays it out for you to help you make those decisions. Like Steve and Lisa both said, I think one of the neat things about small businesses is that we're all kind of in it together, and we all have to collaborate. So whether you're collaborating with a CPA or an attorney or another small business owner, that's why we wanted to do this, was to start that conversation. How do we all help each other be more successful? I want to be really respectful of your time, so I want to wrap up. But are there any questions? Is there anything specifically that you have an interest about going forward that you would like to make sure we address? Silence. It's ominous.
It's not ominous. A great presentation.
Could show competence.
Say that again?
Silence shows competence.
Oh, there you go.
You're covering what we need to know.
Yeah, the goal is not in any way, form, or fashion to invoke fear. It's just to have the conversation. So then next week, if I can get it. All right, next week. I like this. Your idea to stop paying our bills was pure genius. You can see it caused the cash flow to go sky high. So we'll talk about cash flow and capital. Lisa and Coulter will talk about that and why maybe this short term might be okay, but long term is a really bad plan. So we appreciate you guys coming, and we'll stick around for any questions you may have.